Thank you very much, Caller. And at the very outset, I just want to place on the record, in the day that's in it, my sincerest sympathies on the passing of the late Emma McPahuna from her adopted home in South Kerry and West Kerry. It's a very sad day for her family, her relatives, her friends, and it's only right and proper that it be acknowledged here this evening. Before I make a contribution, I hold clinics regularly where she's been living, and she's going to be a big loss, not just to her family but to the community that really liked her, admired her as an advocate for injustices that were done to people and the way they were left down. And sadly, she has lost her life in a way that should not have happened, and it's just so terribly, terribly sad. And I just think it's right and befitting to pay tribute to her and to her bravery and the way that she gave of her own time when time was so precious to her, to highlight the injustice that was done, not just to herself. When she was an advocate, she wasn't an advocate just for herself, she was for other people who were misdiagnosed and who sadly are living with a sentence that is literally a life sentence or a death sentence following on from that misdiagnosis. So it's a sad day for her family, and I just want to acknowledge that, and thank you for allowing me that indulgence, last Caller. I appreciate it very much. First of all, with regard to this budget, and Minister, speaking about yourself personally, it's only proper, seeing as you're the man in the hot seat there, to acknowledge that the first day before you were actually made a minister, when I went to you and invited you to come to Kerry, because there was very serious problems below there, not only did you take up the invite, and the minute you became a minister you came to Kerry, but you then looked first-hand at the problems that were there, and you put your money where your mouth was afterwards. And people can be critical of governments and of ministers and of everybody, but I treat everybody as I meet them, and you have been nothing but straight and honest. And if you could deliver money, you delivered it. If you couldn't, you said you couldn't. And to be honest, when a person is dealing with you, you get what you're dealing with, you see what you're dealing with, and I want to acknowledge that. And I just want to thank you in advance for the rest of the money you're going to give to us in Kerry, because we're looking forward very much to a couple of more projects being securing funding from your department, and your department no doubt has a big hand to play in Kerry, because if you take, for instance, the Office of Public Works and all of the other sectors that come under your remit, you indeed yourself and your department and your officials, you're a very important person in our book in County Kerry, and I'd like to acknowledge that. First of all, to deal with the housing and the housing budget, of course there had to be an increase in the housing programme, but I'm worried as to the effect that that's going to have to people who are on our housing lists. For instance, Kerry County Council have an excellent housing department who do great work with the resources that they are given. But whether that's dealing with the homeless situation or whether it's dealing with our ordinary housing list, young couples, young ladies who have children who are on the waiting list for many, many years, whether it's in Killarney, Killorglin, Carrickiveen, East Kerry, West Kerry, North Kerry, we have an awful big housing list. And I'm worried as to whether the money that's being delivered in this budget, whether it's going to have enough of an impact to make a difference to those people's lives, because that's what everybody is doing at the end of the day, Minister. They're looking to see, will this help their own circumstances. The additional €121 million for HAP in 2019, I'm disappointed that there are people who refuse to accept HAP. I think that's actually wrong. I think that if a person is renting a property, okay, it's their own property and they're entitled to do with it as they wish, but I don't think there should be anything as looking any worse on a person who's on HAP or a RAS or any other payment. They should be treated the same by a person owning property, and they should be given the opportunity to rent that property. But unfortunately the caps, I know in our own county the caps are well below the market rents, and that's an issue that has to be dealt with. With regard to the change that has been made on the restriction of the amount of interest that may be deducted in respect of loans used to purchase, that obviously is a welcome because of the simple fact that we need the private sector to help us in dealing with the list of people that are waiting for housing. With regard to our health budget, while the health budget is larger than ever, the biggest in the history of the state, yet nothing is changing or is likely to change. The HSE is too top heavy, not enough on the ground staff, even to recruit enough nurses and pay them properly. Because I believe that we can get more nurses to work in our hospitals, but we need to pay them adequately. And we need to pay them what they'd be able to get in the private sector. I know that still in the community hospital inside in Kenmare, and back in Dingle and other hospitals like that, it's replicated throughout the rest of the county and the country. We have beds that can't open because of lack of staff. Why can't we get the staff? Because they're not willing to work for the HSE. Why won't they work for the HSE? Because when they're there, they're ran ragged into the ground and they're not paid properly. The other night, I gave a good few hours inside in a very busy A&E and saw again firsthand, as I did all during the summer long, I saw firsthand how hard people work on the ground, and I marched with the nurses from the A&E department in Kerry University Hospital when they went outside of the hospital, a thing that they don't do lightly, to protest about the inadequate resources that are being given to them to carry out their work. Will this budget mean a difference to those nurses? Will it mean a difference to the line managers inside in the different departments, whether it's A&E or the different wards throughout the hospitals in County Kerry and throughout the rest of the country? I truly am doubtful that it will. I'm very, very worried, Lascaux Caller, that the money will actually go towards more layers of bureaucracy, more layers of red tape, and that it will not mean enough of an impact on the ground to the people that I'm there to fight for. The €25 increase in the weekly income threshold for GP cards, it's welcome, but having said that, people are put through so many hoops to actually get a medical card. When it comes to getting a full medical card for people who are ill, the level of scrutiny that they're put under. There was one time, Minister, and you remember this yourself, when a person, if the word cancer was mentioned in an application form for a medical card, that medical card was processed without any waste of time. But unfortunately and sadly today, even if there's reports there from a GP or even from a consultant, they're not inclined to take on board that situation, and people with cancer should immediately get a medical card, because at a time, Lascaux Caller, in your life, when people are down and they have enough trouble, the one thing they needn't be worrying about is filling up forms and trying to prove their point to get a medical card. So I'm very, very worried about that. I welcome the 50-cent reduction in the prescription charges from €2 to €1.50 for all medical card holders over the age of 70. The €10 reduction in the monthly drug payment scheme, the threshold from 134 to 124 is obviously welcome. The health budget for mental health to €1 billion, considering the crisis that we have with suicide, parasuicide, and trying to prevent people having trouble with their mental health, it's obviously all right and proper, Lascaux Caller, that we put as much resources as can be spent prudently and worthwhile into mental health services. The National Treatment Purchase Fund increased 75 million, an increase of 36%. But yet people are having to go to Belfast to have cataracts removed from their eyes. This is a crazy situation. If you just stand back from it and think about it, we will let people go blind here in Ireland, in the Republic. We'll let them go blind. They'll be on a waiting list forever. They won't have their cataracts removed and they'll go blind. So the answer is they can avail of the Treatment Purchase Fund and go to the north and have their procedures. But having said that, that is a crazy situation, to be making people make the journey, and while you would try to make it as pleasant for them as you possibly can, it's still, for elderly people, it's not the right way to have their healthcare treatment given to them. And now I've started a new initiative of taking people to have their hips and knees operations done in the north. Again, I'm ashamed to say that a person has to actually go to that length to have a procedure that should be able to be to be had in our own hospitals, in our own counties, but that we have to go north to do it. It's certainly not right. The increase of the SNEA posts up to 950 in 2019, that's obviously very welcome. The increase in the new apprentices programme by a further 10% with over 1,200 additional crafts and earn as you learn places. That is obviously very welcome. Social welfare, I believe, of course, as was committed all along by the government, that they would increase social welfare payments. People who are living on very low incomes, they need this increase, and the restoration of the Christmas bonus. Of course, that is all right and proper. And one thing that was left out was the restoration of the debt grant, because as you know, and I said it already last caller, when people are vulnerable and sick and ill, they need help and assistance. When people die, they need assistance, and the full restoration of the debt grant should be implemented, and I was hoping that it would have been implemented in full in this budget, but I certainly would continue to lobby for that. The new paid parental leave is something that is to be welcomed. With regard to dealing with social insurance benefits for the self-employed, for far too long self-employed people have been left down in this country, and they haven't been taken care of, because while everything is fine, while they may be creating their own job and a job for their neighbours or people in their parish or in their community, but when something goes wrong and if they get ill or sick, and to think that they're left in a situation where they have nothing for themselves, that was wrong. So it's only right that that would be dealt with in this budget. Increasing the back to school clothing and footwear allowance by €25 is to be very welcomed, as it is badly needed. I welcome the fact that diesel and the carbon taxes haven't been increased further, because that would have been detrimental. But what I would have to say with regard to the increase in the VAT in the hospitality sector, County Kerry is reeling today with the news that it is to increase from 9% to 13.5%. At a time when the sector was just trying to recover from one of the worst recessions that it ever went through. These people, family businesses, and in particular it is a massive attack on rural Ireland. And I note, Minister, that the word rural has only been mentioned 6 or 7 times in this budget. That shows that the government weren't really thinking of rural Ireland when they were developing and putting together this budget. Whereas in the programme for government, they included the word rural an awful lot, over 70 or 80 times. But they were listening that time, but unfortunately they seem to have stopped listening. And to think, and I certainly am not going to let it go in this House, because, and I hate saying it about a person when they're not inside the chamber to defend themselves, but think that at a time when we have a minister who is charged with a junior responsibility role for tourism in County Kerry, to think that at that time that this increase would go from 9% to 13.5%, well, I can tell you one thing: the people who create much needed employment in County Kerry and around the western seaboard and our rural Ireland, who are reeling today and trying to size up what effect this is going to have in their businesses that they cherish and that they adore, and that themselves and their wives and their families might have built up over many years. And to see now this massive increase coming, I mean, if the government really thought that they had to make a change, and if they had put it up 1% or 2%, but to go the full blow from 9% to 13.5%, like I said, the sector is reeling this evening, and they're terrible disappointed with the minister and the junior minister and the government for doing this to them at this time. With regard to agriculture, while there is €57 million extra in additional funding, the biggest problem that I see with it, while I welcome the 3-year extension for the young farmer stamp duty relief, the terrible situation with regard to our beef sector. And to think that we had the farming community, with the IFA, with everybody saying that there has to be a direct a payment with regard to people involved in the sucking industry, people with sucking cows. They have to have the suckler herd to retain our herd at what it's at. We had to have a scheme put in place of at least €200 or €250 per cow. And that seems to be absent. While we'll be studying over the next number of days the finer details of this budget, it's not there as far as I can see, and I've studied it from Indeed, and I'm terribly disappointed with that, Minister. And as are everybody involved in farming up and down the length and breadth of the country, because the beef sector was desperately looking forward to a scheme being put in place at this very important time. With regard to rural and community development, there wasn't much in the Minister's speech about rural Ireland, as I've already stated. With regard to our post offices, we desperately needed community banking. And did we see any commitment in it? We did most certainly not. No commitment whatsoever with regard to community banking. And at a time when we're saying that we want to keep our post offices open, it's in the programme for government, yet no sign of it. With regard to justice, a €60 million increase in the Garda Síochána's budget, and at the same time, and the recruitment of 800 Gardaí, of course I welcome that, but tell that to the Gardaí in Kerry over the weekend, where we were down to an absolute skeleton staff, and where management and Gardaí themselves were hard pressed to provide the service that we appreciate so much that they do give, but it left them in such a vulnerable position because of the way that the budget for overtime has been slashed and completely cut between now and the end of the year. And something will have to be done to address that, because we have to adequately resource our Gardaí and make sure that they have the resources to provide a proper service. I also wish to point out that projects for such issues as a new courthouse for County Kerry for Tralee, I see no money for such projects, and I would certainly continue to lobby very much that we will need funding for projects like that to be undertaken. And I see the Macroom bypass. Whether that's going to be advanced in 2019, there has been various commitments. We have to see schemes like that going ahead. And while I welcome the 40 million additional for pavement repairs and rehabilitation works on regional and local roads, for instance, we have roads in County Kerry that are virtually impassable at the moment, such as the Dáil Road and others that are completely subsided into the ground, and we need to see funding made available for roads like this. I'm very glad to see payments will finalise for the Kerry Sports Academy at Tralee IT, which will be completed this year. This will obviously be a state-of-the-art facility, and I want to welcome that very much. With regard to the income tax reductions for low middle income earners, but still they will actually be no better off, because if you take, for instance, people on the minimum wage who will be getting the increase, and if you take the additional taxes that will be coming out of it, what they will actually finish up with will be very little. And I'd be very worried about people who are struggling, who are trying to pay rent, trying to pay mortgages, and who are living on a low income at a time when the cost of living is continuing to increase. We need to see incentives for people to keep going to work and to try and get on for themselves, because that's what they want to do. And so what I'm saying about this budget overall is it gives very little to everyone, and it seems to be the tourism industry that's paying for it, and I'm really worried about that. While I do appreciate the fact that the minimum wage is going to be increased, what it's actually going to mean to people at the end of the day will be very little. So I'm concerned, and the biggest outrage that is out there today, Minister, is with regard to how am I for time? Is with regard to the tourism sector. So thank you very much, last caller and Minister. Thank you.